Hello everyone, welcome to Chinatown Gang Stories. Today I have a special guest, and his name is Phillip who is a former NYPD Captain, an executive commanding officer for the 5th Precinct in Chinatown. He also lived in Chinatown most of his life. He grew up there. So he's going to give us a perspective of what Chinatown was like back in the days when he was growing up. He served over 33 years with the New York City Police Department. He started out working as a patrol officer in the 7th Precinct, which covers New York City's Chinatown as well, part of it, right? Right near Delancey Street?
Yes.
And then eventually he left the 7th Precinct, got promoted, and became a sergeant and worked at the 6th Precinct, which also covers Chinatown, but it covers Brooklyn, Chinatown.
Brooklyn, Chinatown.
And then he got promoted to lieutenant and then captain. And as a captain, he went to work in the 5th Precinct, which is right in the heart of Chinatown. Well, thank you for coming on this channel. I like to paint a picture of what Chinatown was like back in those days for our viewers. If you can describe what it was like growing up in Chinatown.
Oh, thanks, Mike, for having me here today. It's great to be here. Feels good to be giving back and I guess telling my story of how I was raised in Chinatown. And I remember back in the 70s, in Chinatown, the most powerful gang was the Ghost Shadows. And then they were there through the 80s, through the 90s. For me, I was very lucky growing up. I always remember going to junior high school 65. And then my friends used to tell me, oh yeah, the Ghost Shadows are here recruiting. And that was maybe 12, 13 years old. And then I'm like, oh shit, how am I going to escape this one? And then growing up in Chinatown, you see, the Ghost Shadows were in charge of Mott Street, Bayard Street. So I couldn't walk down those blocks because I was scared who I was going to run into, if I was going to get recruited. It was just one of those things, either you try to stay away from the gangs or be part of the gangs.
So you tried very hard to stay away from the gangs?
Yes, that was probably one of my hardest things, growing up as a kid in Chinatown. Because, as a kid in Chinatown, you respected them because they actually protected Chinatown. You knew they're here looking out for the stores, the business owners, and the people that live in Chinatown. So it was one of those things. It was a fine line of the gangs and then trying to work and live in Chinatown. My parents, we worked. They worked 6 days a week. My dad worked in a restaurant out in Connecticut. So, they were too busy working and they didn't really worry what was going on in Chinatown. So it was left for me to live on to go to school, to study, and to blend in the neighborhood, to live in the neighborhood. So, but the gangs were respected then. They're part of the association. There was leaders in the association, and they led the community. Everything that they needed was through these associations. My parents never really know what was going on the streets. They were just too busy working. They just did their day. My mom was a seamstress in the factory, so she was too busy working and trying to raise the family. They didn't know.
Did any of your friends or relatives get caught up in the gangs?
A lot of my friends joined the gangs during the 70s and 80s. Well, during the 80s, when the Ghost Shadows were in power, they joined the Ghost Shadows. And then when the Flying Dragons came to power after the Ghost Shadows got hit by the feds, the Flying Dragons were in power, and they all joined the Flying Dragons. So it was one of those things. For me, I was lucky because. I think back at it when I was like 16 and a half years old. Back then, you were able to take the exam for the police department. And then when I took that exam, after I passed that exam, I had to wait till I was like 20 years old to join the police department. So it was like 4 years, almost 4 years. I had to wait to see, to make sure I don't join gangs, stay out of trouble. While all my friends were trying to decide if they would join the gangs, which they were. So I was very lucky.
What year did you join the police department?
1989, July 1989, and And I remember it was real hard back then to have not to join the gang because everybody joined the gang. Everybody wanted to join, two of the most powerful gangs in Chinatown. It was the way of life. It was a part of growing up. And I always remember back then when I was like probably about maybe 16, 17, I got beaten up on East Broadway coming out of the library. And I remember I went to the library to do my homework, and then when I was coming out of the library, there was 6 gang members. I think there was a Hong Ching back in the day on East Broadway. I could be ashamed of the TOs too, but they grabbed me, and then when they grabbed me, one guy simulated that he had a gun on the side, so I went with him. And then when they took me to the back of a hallway by a factory, I go, oh shit, I had to fight my way out. And luckily, I ended up with just a couple of stitches. I got whacked a couple of times with a pipe. I fought my way out and escaped it. So that pretty much led me to the fact where I reported to the police, and then from there, I always wanted to help and to help people, to be a cop. And that day, I always remember, I thought I was gonna be dead that day. I thought I was gonna get killed. I thought they were gonna take me to the back and put a bullet in the back of my head. But I was lucky.
Why did you think they targeted you?
It was the clothes I was wearing. We're all back then wearing, those CB jackets, the Jordache Sergio jeans, tight fitting. So I always want to look the part, but I never became a gang member.
So they probably thought you were a rival gang member.
Yes, they probably thought I was one of the Flying Dragons back in the day, because most of my,
Did any of the gangs try recruiting you?
No, because I was one of those people that was trying to get my friends away from the gangs. I was always one of those. I was an advocate against it. I always thought that that playing basketball, football, sports, and going to school, kept us out of trouble. The YMCA back then, there was a lot of things that was going on, that you could have done to keep you out of trouble and keep you away from these gangs. Once they found out that I was in the police academy, pretty much they left me alone. They knew I had my uniform. I was coming from the police academy in uniform with my bags, with my stuff. So they respected what I was doing, and I respected what they were doing. It was just 2 different lives now. I led mine, and they led theirs. And
I did an episode on this channel about a person by the name of Joe Lai. Did you ever have an encounter with him?
oh yes, I remember probably 15, maybe 15, 14. I remember Joe Lai, me and him had a fight in one of the video arcades on Grand Street. And then I didn't know who he was, and I grew up on the street, so I always, if somebody was gonna fight, I would fight, and we fought, and then eventually I found out a couple of months later he was, one of the guys rising in power with the Flying Dragons. So for me, I was like, oh wow, I was scared of him, and I was worried that he wanted to recruit me or beat me up.
So if Joe Lai didn't get killed, you probably would have had some problems with him.
Oh, definitely, 100%. It was one of those things that I grew up in Chinatown. He was one of the leaders of the Flying Dragons.
What year was this?
Maybe I was like 14, 15.
That was when he just started with the Flying Dragons.
Yes.
And he was a known bully. Bullies don't last too long. Why did he start the fight with you?
We were just playing I was playing video games. I was a kid playing video games, and I guess I was on his turf. I knew that Chinatown was pretty much locked up. I didn't dare to walk. And I remember these blocks I couldn't walk: Bayard Street, Pell Street.
It's tough living in Chinatown, and you have to stay away from certain streets.
Yes, because I used to work at People's Pharmacy on Mott Street, and there was a pharmacy between Bayard and Canal on Mott Street. I remember I had to go walk around Mulberry Street just to come around Canal Street, just to come down, so I don't have to see any of the gang members. So I won't have to run into them or get beat up by them.
I'm sure a lot of people who lived in Chinatown can relate to your story, and you're not the only one who had to, take different routes to avoid the gangs.
Yeah, no, that was it was either you're a gang member or you were trying to avoid them. And for me, I was trying to avoid them, the best of my ability. I just stayed away from these blocks.
There were a lot of gun violence back in those days in Chinatown, and I'm pretty sure if you live there, you probably know of all the shootings.
Yeah, no, going and watching the police show up and then the dead bodies laying around, it was interesting as a kid, And then when I joined the police department and knowing that my friends were all gang members, I didn't even want to really hear who shot who, because I didn't want to know and I don't want to be caught up in the middle of choosing my friends or the police department.
Because you went to school with these kids.
Yes. So it was hard. It was a fine line of still being a cop and when watching my friends all become gang members. And some of them getting killed. And
that's what's growing up in the inner city is like. Sometimes you go to school with these kids and then they get caught up in the gangs. It's hard to stay away, from the people you grew up with.
Yeah, they're still friends of mine now. I really didn't keep in touch while I was in the police department, but now that I'm retired, we still meet up together now as friends. So it's good to still see them. They're part of our team, our basketball team, our football team.
So these kids who were your friends back in those days, who were part of your basketball team, they eventually became gang members, and you became a cop. And then you had to avoid them, and they knew that you were a cop, so they respected that fact that you were a cop, and then they didn't contact you. But now that you're retired, you guys reconnected. Friends just don't go away, right?
Yes, I always say friends to the end. We meet each other, at different places now, so it's good, to rekindle my friendship with them.
I mean, a lot of these gang members, deep inside, they're good people. It's just that they got caught up in that life. So they served their time in prison, many years, I believe, right?
Yes, they all, they're doing well now. They did their time.
So they did their time. They came out, and now they're doing well. They're no longer about that life. And it's just that when you're young and easily influenced, you get caught up in that life, especially during that time. That's what Chinatown was all about. Every street had a gang running it.
Yeah. So it's great going back to the 5th Precinct and becoming the executive officer of the 5th Precinct. It was for me like I was like in my dream job, to give back where I grew up, where I walked the streets, where my parents grew up, and it's just really brought back old memories and bring back everything that I did as a kid, to see Chinatown growing with businesses and stuff like that. So it was great.
So you came full circle. What year did you go to the 5th Precinct when you got promoted? What year was that?
2016. I went back as the captain and the executive of the 5th Precinct.
So you were the captain of the 5th Precinct in 2016.
It was just great. It was like my streets again. Now I'm just it's like growing up, but this time these are my streets. My street, Bay Street, they're all my streets now. I was in charge. I was responsible for the crime, the people of the community. I was out there reaching out with the community, speaking to elderly, the kids, everything. It was for me to give back. It was something like it was rewarding thing in my life to really give back.
And by that time, the gangs were no longer in existence. The gangs that you knew of, that you grew up with, back then.
Back then, yeah. I remember when I was a cop and I was in the 7th Precinct, and there was a fine line. A lot of things were happening in Chinatown, and there was a lot of things happening when I got promoted sergeant in Brooklyn, Chinatown. There was a lot of things that I didn't really want to know because I was more worried that it was my friends or somebody else that would have been caught up in other, with the police department.
What was it like when you got promoted as a sergeant and you went to the 66th precinct covering Brooklyn's Chinatown?
Well, back then, I remember they gave you a choice when you got promoted to sergeant of where you wanted to go. So I said, you know what, let me try, there's a Brooklyn Chinatown. Let me try what's going out there. It'll keep me away from the Chinatown where I grew up and maybe away from my friends. So when I went out to Brooklyn, I go, everything's really reconnected. The gangs had outreach to everything. They had the gambling parlors in Brooklyn. They had the massage parlors in Brooklyn. So I was like, oh, I didn't leave Chinatown. There's still Chinatown still here.
And what year was that?
1994.
So that was when gangs were still active.
Oh, that was the height of the gang wars, height of the power of the drugs, the guns,
Home invasions,
robberies, you name it. It was
shootings,
going on.
robberies.
It was going. It was, you know, and then for me, I was like, I thought I was getting promoted, and I was going to escape. But that escape I didn't, you know. So, but I kept the fine line where, I stayed on the track. Law enforcement was my dream. It was something that I always want to give back to the community. So for me, it was easy, you know.
And that's how we met.
Yes.
Almost 30 years ago.
Yes.
My first day at the precinct, you were my training sergeant.
Yes. I met Mike, and I was very young. I was 20, maybe 25 years old. And then when I met Mike, and then I go, oh shit. I go, this kid's not, a regular Asian kid, you know. He grew up, in my mind, he grew up somewhere in the gangs of Chinatown. So, but I now explain to people that for me, I let people know about how I grew up, where I resisted the gangs, and I was lucky. And the police, and I joined the gang of now 40,000 police officers. So it's different. And then when I met Mike, I go, wow. And now I became his boss, and now I'm his immediate supervisor. I have to train him and then lead him. So there was a fine line between being a leader for the field training sergeant and being Mike's team leader, and then not knowing what was in his past, while he knew what was in my past. So it was a weird thing, to be able to let him know where I came from, how I grew up in as a kid in Chinatown, and then now in Brooklyn enforcing laws in Brooklyn, and how to stay out of trouble in the police department.
And you had a feeling that I was a gang member, a former gang member?
Yes, and I was like,
what gave you that impression?
Once I met Mike, I saw his tattoos. I'm like, oh, and I saw the way he acted, how he spoke to people, how he handled himself on the streets as being a cop. Me and Mike became best friends. So I taught him everything I knew, and he just didn't teach me everything he knew, which was great for me, because I always say that when the light shines, I have nothing to give.
And we've been working with each other almost every day for the last 25 years in the police department, and I never gave you a clue or inkling of what my past was.
Yes, Mike was a good. I guess I look back at Mike was a good friend. He always protected me, not letting me know what he did in the past. To be able to see on his videos now, under the Chinatown gang stories, it's incredible to see people give back, to let people know what was going on back then. It's for me. I want to give back to the law enforcement route. For me, I joined the gang of 40,000 of uniformed cops, which was bigger gangs than the Flying Dragons, the only in the Ghost Shadows. And I till this day, I believe I know that the police department was the best gang ever. They reach out to people, help people, serve the people.
Well, the police department is moving in a different direction now. It's doing positive things for the community, as opposed to when we first came on.
Yeah, that's true. It's different now. A lot of the Asians all join the police department. They're making a difference. So it's great to see them out there, the young ones. Everybody's everybody's kids join the police department. It's great to promote the police department. Something about the police I love, and I want to always promote the police department.
Yeah, basically the police department is what gave us the opportunity.
It was a choice. Thank God I chose the right route, or route that I took.
You know what? It's for kids with limited opportunities. You know, it's either the military or civil service. It's the way to go.
Yes.
You know, especially for the minorities back in those days. We didn't have too much opportunities. And now we're retired. We have a condo here, somewhere in Southeast Asia, right? Enjoying our life, collecting our pension.
Yes, that's the best part of it, the dream, you know.
Got our retirement visa here. Living the dream.
That's it, living the dream.
Sharing our stories with the world. Yeah. And a lot of these stories about me, you're hearing for the first time, even though we've known each other for all these years, and we practically like see each other every day, talk to each other every day.
Yeah, I'm learning something new from Mike almost every day now through his videos, his friends. Yeah.
And you haven't met any of my friends.
Yes, first time, no, all these years now I get to meet some of them.
The gangs as we know it is a thing of the past now. I mean, but there's still, you know, clusters of illegal activities here and there, you know, within the Asian community. What kind of advice would you give the kids nowadays growing up to avoid doing illegal activities?
My biggest advice for kids now, which I always tell the younger kids, that pick somebody that you idolize, that you look up to, that person that's out there changing the world, making a difference, helping the community, and could be anything. You know, could be law enforcement, could be starting your own hobby, something you love doing. You know,
Find a good mentor.
find a good mentor.
You are who you hang out with.
Yes, I believe I was a decent mentor in the police department. I believe I led a lot of people. I taught a lot of people. A lot of people taught me, and for me, once I learned something, I try to give it away to somebody else, so they could become that great leader. So find that mentor, somebody you could look up to.
Crime doesn't pay. I did investigations for about 17 years. We have a lot of resources to work with in the police department. If they want to get you, they'll get you.
Yeah, you can't get away with anything now. The feds, NYPD, somebody's gonna catch you along the way. Just not worth it.
I mean, if you commit a crime now, you know, with the technology that they have at their disposal, it's very difficult to get away with a crime now.
Yeah, you can't get away with it.
I mean, let's say we're talking about on the federal level. You can forget about getting away from the feds. It's almost like impossible. If they want you, they'll get you.
Yeah, the
know,
feds
maybe-
got all the resources,
All the resources that they have
the
available.
technology, they got everything on their hand. So that's there too.
If they can find someone out in the mountain somewhere, in the middle of nowhere, they'll be able to find you in the US.
That's true.
Unfortunately, the technology wasn't there years ago, and that's why there's so many cold cases in Chinatown.
Yeah, back then there was no videos, there was no cell phones, everybody just had pages,
Witnesses were afraid to come forward,
no witnesses.
and these shooters are still alive and out there, and they're terrified of them. You know, there's just a handful of shooters out there, you know, because you had plenty of guys in the Ghost Shadows, Flying Dragons, but there's just a handful of them who did all the shootings. And it was difficult for the NYPD to crack those cases. Only the feds can do it.
Yeah, and NYPD wasn't prepared to fight the Asian gang wars. There weren't that many Asian cops. Nobody really spoke the language.
When I came on, there were like there was about maybe 500 Asian police officers. And when you're talking about Asian, it covers Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese. So there weren't too many. And there were only a handful who spoke the dialect, who spoke the language. When I came on, it was me and you and maybe 2 other Asians in the precinct out of 150 cops.
Yes.
You were the supervisor, and then there were 3 other cops,
Yes.
including myself. One of them passed away. The other one, wasn't he arrested?
Yes.
He got wrapped up in a corruption case.
Yes, that was it. That was four of us in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Back in the heyday of the gang wars.
So you were 20 years old when you became a cop.
Yes, 20 years old.
20 years old, you're not even allowed to drink alcohol, and you're not even allowed to go into a casino.
Yes, I remember, because I couldn't go to a bar because the academy told me that you're not 21, you can't drink, don't get caught in the bar, or you're on probation. So, as a 20-year-old, I'm like, wow, it was all new to me. So I'm like, okay, well, I could stay out of trouble. I was very lucky. 20 years old, I joined the police department. So.
Such a young age to be a cop, like especially getting a gun and shield and given all that power.
Yeah, it was a lot of responsibilities.
A lot of responsibility. A lot of young kids, they don't know how to handle that type of responsibility.
For me, it was easy. It was the transition from the streets into law enforcement. And I just took the training from the police academy and then blended in from growing up on the streets. So the transition was real easy for me. How to be a leader, how to be a caring person. That's all you have to be out there, serving the community, every community.
33 years is a long time. It's a long career, and most of that time you were a supervisor, so you have that supervisor mindset.
That's
that leadership role. As a leader, you want to put a good team together. People who are capable and efficient at what they're doing.
Yes, you bring the smartest, the best, sharpest people around you, and then the team just keeps moving along as you go up.
Some of these supervisors, they don't know how to pick the right person, and all they do is pick these yes men to surround them.
Each team leader has their own style.
My mindset is different because I became an investigator, a detective, investigating cases. I just go according to the evidence and the facts.
And Mike was always one of the best cops out there. I told him what he had to get done, and he went out there and did it. I didn't have to worry about it. He took care of his business, so it was just great to have Mike, working with me to be part of the team.
What was it like when you found out about my past recently?
I accepted it. I know that for you to people have to trust you to come out here to speak, to talk about what they did in their past or what they didn't do in their past, on the Chinatown gang story. So it's great to see you regroup, reform your team, after retirement, putting everybody back together and getting the message out.
In a way, it's giving back to the community, sharing these stories with the public, preserving this piece of history. Hopefully someone out there will get something out of these videos. They'll gain something from it. Maybe it's something that they went through or they're going through in their life, and they decide to make that change. To make the change, you need to realize what you're doing wrong, and maybe they can learn from our mistakes. So the first step to any change is realization. Once you realize what you're doing wrong, that's when you take the initiative to make that change. And hopefully our stories will bring some sort of awareness to people when they hear what we did, the mistakes that we made in life, and the steps that we took to correct it. Maybe they can get something out of it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, 33 years is a long time to be in the police department. It's hard to get adjusted back to the civilian life after so many years, right?
Yeah, it's nice just to have a lot of free time now. No stress from the police department. And then watching all kids grow up and watching people that mentor the police department move up in the ranks. So it's really just great to be able to sit back and watch.
Now you're free from all the internal politics and the numbers-driven game.
Yeah, it's just I can look at it from the outside now. As a civilian.
What was important back then is no longer important now.
Definitely.
What you stress over back then, you can laugh at it now.
Yeah, now I'm out on the outside looking in. Yeah, I don't have to worry about it.
I always believe in having a good mentor. I remember, I was traveling abroad with this other member of the service who eventually rose up through the ranks, and we were cops together. And I told him, I said, one day if you ever become a boss, a supervisor, you gotta mentor. Because when I came on the job, there was nobody. I didn't know anything about the police department. Nobody ever gave me any advice. It's like I go to these meetings, or I bump into like other Asian cops, and nobody offered me any help. It seems like they all had like that certain clique that they hung out with, or they had a chip on their shoulders. I'm like, get rid of that. It's like we're all together. We're all like on the same boat. So eventually he started the mentorship program, and it worked out really well. I think it's very important to have a good mentor system in place, because everyone needs a mentor, someone to help guide them when they're new at it. I was never in a position of power to make any changes. I was just a detective, But when you rise to the rank and you're in that position, you can make changes. Some people, when they rise to the rank, they forget where they come from.
Yeah, that's true.
It's so sad to see that. And there's not too many Asian supervisors out there, high-ranking Asian supervisors out there. You can count it in one hand. Well, it was a pleasure having you here. Thank you for giving your input to Chinatown Gang Stories. And until next time, hopefully there'll be a part 2.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mike. Thank you for your friendship. It's been a great one. Let's keep it going.
We had a great one.
Yep, let's keep it going.
Here it is. You see this? Yeah. I won my battle. Adventures battle in my shadow. Yeah. I shot my arrow. It's time to think it over. I had to. Yeah. I touched that ladder. It didn't really fucking like matter. Yeah. I watched them gather. Yeah. Cause 92 is when it all shattered. Yeah. Born and bred, BK, one thought, get paid, move work, catch phase. What more can I say? Be first in battle, trust me, life matters. Raised up, no father, more like a Chinatown guy, go shadow.